I adore foreign media, but aside from anime and other occasional divergences, I don't discuss them on my channel very much. I'd like to change that moving forward, starting with the 4-time Oscar-winning Parasite that definitely deserves the accolades. Impressed by what I saw, I am slowly working toward BongJoonHo's filmography whenever I get the chance. But for now, let's look at the story of 2019's greatest hit. We find ourselves cooped up in the semi-basement of the poverty-stricken Kims in South Korea, where they devise a plan to slowly coax the wealthy Parks into hiring each family member, who pretend not to be related and overstate their skill sets, in place of all their workers without ever letting on to their secret. At least, for a while, and the hilarity of the situation soon shifts to disturbing revelations about the Park household. Most stories depicting the rich-poor dynamic tend to favor the latter, but Parasite doesn't seem to be sympathizing with either side necessarily. It weighs the strengths and faults of both families fairly equally. The Kims are clearly close with one another and are very resourceful, but they don't think ahead and get too caught up in taking advantage of their employers every chance they get that they never consider asking for legitimate help. Using at least some portion of the income they receive toward any sort of investment vehicle, or perhaps opening up a small business of their own, so that they may find enough stability to leave the Parks along the way. We don't even see them upgrading their living conditions, yet having the latest smartphone appears to be their top concern. As generous and welcoming as the Parks are, they are incredibly closed off from the world and each other. They are also lazy and never catch on to anything. What is a blessing for them is an absolute nightmare for those living in destitution. But their ignorance nevertheless serves as a weapon for anyone who comes to know them well enough to get what they want, rendering the whole ordeal even more unnerving. So really, anybody could be at risk of losing depending on how knowledge is being used and who's benefited by the way events play out based on certain powers that are exercised. Everyone is leeching off of each other in some way or another, and that's essentially how the film got its name. I would argue that there's another meaning to it in the sense of how the story comes full circle symbolically, but I dare not spoil it. The main question that came to my mind by the film's end is, was any of this worth it? Even though this is meant to be a more microcosmic look at the effects of class discrimination in one environment, I think Parasite nonetheless speaks to society at large in terms of this failure to properly address the issues present in both the rich and poor communities, and the consequences of getting involved in fraudulent practices. Anyone who is aware of the constant scam phone calls happening in Canada lately knows what I'm talking about, and that's just one less extreme example. The cast's acting is phenomenal, oscillating from one style to another as the situation demands it. While I would have cut a scene or two for an enhanced flow, the build-up to that tonal shift is so natural that you're not confused by it when it happens, and you can instead allow yourself to arrive at different conclusions without feeling as though you're missing something or that you're being completely insensitive toward the issues at hand. I know I'm treading some murky waters here, but the reality is we have to come to terms with uncomfortable topics and perspectives as well as promoting more stories like Parasite in order to really get anywhere as far as conversations are concerned. There are people out there who feel as though they have no other options. I acknowledge this. But at the same time, the film's message nevertheless seems to go back to this idea of never losing sight of what's important, regardless of where you are in life, and cherishing whatever it is you have, being careful and aware of yourself and what goes on around you. However, even I can admit that the issue is much more complex than that, and there are countless reasons why people may end up in certain places in life. There are not always stakes involved, whether we are in control of our actions or not, and not everything will always stay the same. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not as easy as holding one party accountable, to label something as absolute, and that not all cases are going to be comparable because context matters. But this in no way means we can't feel sympathy on different levels. Anyway, these are just some other thoughts regarding the film that came to me. If you're in the minority who hasn't watched it when it first came out in theaters, like I and many others have, or after the fact, I implore you to check it out however you can, whether on demand, Blu-ray, DVD, or digital.